Good morning. Good morning. We are going live. It's another episode of Bad Boss Live with Anya Soto. And today I have Jenna Leyton-Jones with me. We belong to the same networking group. I had a pleasure of chatting with her many times. Really love the way, as an attorney, she sees culture and believes in an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So Jenna is an employment law attorney whose practice is focused on keeping companies out of the courtroom. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how do we make sure we keep you out of the courtroom? What is the prevention? And prior to opening her own law firm, she was a partner at another Southern California firm where she spent over a decade defending employers in litigation. She's been awarded an AV preeminent, I guess that's how you pronounce it, rating bar Martindale-Hubbell for achieving the highest level of professional excellence based on her legal knowledge, communication skills, ethical standards. She is also listed in the 28th and 29th editions of the Best Lawyers in America. Hello. Hi, Jenna.
Hi, good morning, Anya. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here. We talk a lot with our clients, obviously, around compliance and what is the role of HR consultant versus an attorney. So I really want to jump in by asking you a question. When do clients bring you in? Give us a couple of examples when a client would reach out to an employment attorney.
Sure. So, as you mentioned during that nice intro, my focus really is on the preventative side of employment law. I spent many years litigating cases and defending companies after they had gotten sued for because they were not compliant in many cases. I decided to pivot my career a few years ago, and when I opened my own firm, I really wanted to pursue what I'm passionate about, which is the preventative side of employment law and keeping
Mhm.
companies out of the courtroom and making sure the companies are dotting their I's and crossing their T's so that they don't get sued. So my work now, my practice kind of falls into three buckets. Number one is the day-to-day advice and counsel. So that includes things like drafting or reviewing employee handbooks. It could be drafting employment agreements or severance agreements or arbitration agreements. It also is giving that sort of proactive advice about all of those myriad employment situations that arise on a day-to-day basis.
Mhm,
So whether it
mhm.
be an employee that has a disability and needs an accommodation or needs a leave of absence, or it could be a wage and hour issue, or it could be a classification question, either contractor or employee or exempt versus non-exempt, all of those questions, I'm happy to help clients with. The second bucket that my work kind of falls in is the independent workplace investigations, where I'm hired
This
as
is my juicy topic. Yes.
I'm hired as the independent investigator that goes in to investigate those, salacious allegations that sometimes are made of harassment or discrimination or retaliation or various other
Yes.
things going on in the workplace. And then the third bucket is the training piece of it, and training managers, training employees to hopefully make sure that everyone fulfills their legal obligations and that the workplace is harmonious.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, I definitely want to, I guess, go into the second bucket because I feel like my audience would appreciate it because we always run into, as you said, like social situations, right? And when they bring you in for investigations, what are maybe like some mistakes that you have seen that could have been so easily avoided that ended up costing a lot of time, money? And I imagine, right, it's like employer brand, right, it gets damaged, like ability to attract employees, it just the morale, all of that.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So, I mean, I think if I could like sum it up sort of in one critical
Yes.
key word, the word is communication. And there are so many times that I am brought in to investigate, a situation or an allegation where there's, someone feels like they have been perhaps, let's say, discriminated against because they fall into a certain protected category. And upon further examination and upon, interviewing various witnesses and gathering other evidence, what really becomes apparent is that it comes down to a fundamental communication issue. And, Not all, but a lot of times the evidence suggests that there is no nefarious discrimination on the basis of any protected characteristic. It really is a lack of clear and cogent communication,
Yeah.
between employees, whether it's manager to who they're managing, or sometimes just coworkers. So I think communication, plays such a huge role in workplaces, and really, poor communication or a lack of communication gives rise to so many claims to HR, which subsequently, get investigated.
Yeah. And then what would be your recommendation in that case?
In terms of what the organization should do post
Yeah. What can
investigation.
they do? Yeah. Moving. How do you recover from that, move forward, but also how do you prevent it in the future from happening?
Yeah. So I think, first and foremost, if there is a claim of harassment or discrimination or retaliation, the legal obligation is to conduct the investigation and determine, if any policies have been violated or if the law has been violated. And if either of those two things have occurred, then the employer has a legal obligation to take steps to remediate that piece of it. In terms
Hmm.
of the communication piece, if there's a finding that, maybe there's no illegal activity, but it seems to be more of either a personality conflict or a communication issue, then I think the answer is gonna vary by organization. Some organizations choose to either internally or bring in sort of an external mediator to kind of sit down with the people involved and talk
Hmm.
through the issues and try to find some common grounds and sort of put together a game plan that's workable for everyone moving forward to
Yeah.
hopefully present those
Yeah.
issues moving forward. Other organizations choose to handle it differently, but again, I think it comes down to finding ways to make sure, if it is a communication issue, to find ways moving forward to make sure that those lines of communication are open and that everyone feels comfortable,
Yeah.
communicating in the workplace.
Well, no, that sounds, and because I'm always thinking, right? It's like, okay, but how do you repair? Let's say, yes, you didn't find evidence, because that's something we see in our work, right? Conflict happened, or someone did something, and that kind of reputation follows them for years and years, and they feel like they're being punished for something they did 2 years ago, and it's like, because we never have that completion or repairment, right? So I love the mediation piece of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll also say, I'm talking to you. So another huge piece of it, obviously, is the training piece of it. And sometimes, it makes sense for organizations to bring in somebody from the outside to work with their managers, to work with their supervisors, on their management style, on their communication, because a lot of times, the missing piece of it, or managers don't even know what they're doing wrong or what's kind of causing these repercussions. So sometimes they just do need a professional, like you or someone in your organization, to come in and work with them and say, here's ways you can improve, here's what's going on, let's see if we can get you, to a different place.
And I agree that this is the biggest piece. I am a strong believer in like lack of training, lack of education, lack of emotional awareness or social awareness that is causing a lot of these issues, that it's very rarely actually like a bad intent.
Mhm. Absolutely.
That's my experience. I don't know. Do you have a similar experience?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier,
Yeah.
is a lot of times, the initial claim is, I feel like my manager is doing X because I fall into Y category,
Yeah.
protected category. When upon further examination, there's a lot of other things going on in the relationship, in the communication style, in the feedback that's being given, that's making that employee feel a certain way that isn't necessarily because they fall into Y category.
Oh, the feedback is such a pain point. We always teach in our trainings that feedback is factual, it's timely, and I always recommend based on impact, not my opinion of you. Here's who I think you are as a person. But certain things you did, behaviors have caused and created this impact on a team, right? That is again factual. So that's where I feel like, yeah, so many people, I talk about it on every show, they get promoted, they're not equipped to coach, to give feedback, to do performance management, to even have one on one conversations, and that's causing so much unnecessary drama, conflicts that unfortunately sometimes get all the way to employment attorneys. And I go in and I'm like, this could have been prevented so easily. Like this, it didn't need to get so ugly and so messy.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's not even, I mean, even beyond managers, or people that get promoted into management positions that don't necessarily have management skills right off the bat. Sometimes it's even the business owner, that doesn't have that sort of the management skill. They're really great at being, a business owner in certain respects, but maybe they don't have experience with sort of that HR and that people management piece of it. And even then, that creates a lot of issues.
And most of them don't, right? Because if you look at business owners, they are specialists and experts in something they created, a product that doesn't make them a leader or give them the skills to manage teams. So I'm like, yes, absolutely. And it just seeing that, I think a lot of the times, and I don't know if you have that, companies are thinking, well, I am too small for this. When do you think, what's a good size of company when there's like enough critical mass of people where drama or non-compliance might happen, when it's time to kind of look outside and see how they can, prevent some of these things?
So I would say, non-compliance can happen when you only have even one employee. As California, especially in California, I'll speak to California because that's where I am.
Yeah.
California law, employment law is vast. It's extremely nuanced. It's extremely difficult for even the most well-meaning companies to be 100% compliant, particularly like in the wage and hour arena where the labor code is just, it's vast. So even having, one employee, you can still slip up when it comes to things like making sure you're paying overtime correctly, making sure you're managing meal and rest breaks appropriately.
Yeah.
That said, I typically advise clients, I think once you get to 5 employees, it's a good idea to at least have an employee handbook if you don't already, because a lot of, or there are several major California employment laws that kind of kick in once you hit that 5 employee threshold, like the California Fair Employment and Housing Act, the California Family Rights Act. So I always say, like, once you get to 5 employees, that's a good time to at least, start thinking about getting an employee handbook and getting your ducks in a row as far as sort of a more organized HR process.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. I love that we started a little bit alluding to like employment law in California. Anything else you want to share? And thank you for saying that even the best like intentions, company that have the best intentions, it's really hard to be 100% compliant. So thank you for, I think, all the audience that are listening, giving that permission to be like, listen, it's hard. It's not you, it's the law.
Yeah, I will share, like, I am an employment law attorney. This is what I do for a living. And it is hard for me to keep up with the ever-changing laws in California. Especially if we think back a couple of years ago to the pandemic, when we were getting new guidance on the federal, state, and local levels practically every day, So it's really hard. And I know that, business leaders there are so many things that they need to be focused on in order to have successful organizations. But I do really think it's important for business leaders to, at least have some focus on that HR and legal compliance piece of it, because that is really critical to the success of the organization.
Yeah. Anything else you can share when it comes to like bad boss, bad leaders that maybe you have seen and how not to be one?
Again, going back to what you said, I don't see a lot of bosses or leaders that I think are have bad intentions. I think the vast majority of business owners, of managers, of leaders, want to do the right thing, want to make, want everyone to be successful. But it's a question of how you get there. I will say that one sort of mistake or issue I see frequently, particularly in smaller organizations, is having sort of an admin person or a payroll person also be the de facto HR manager and handle the HR and employment law compliance. Unless that admin person has, substantial education, training, experience in California, or in really any state, in HR, in employment law, having that person be the de facto HR person does open up the organization to a lot of risk, because they don't know what they don't know. And again, it's not nefarious. Nobody has bad intentions, but employment law is just such a nuanced thing that it's really important. I think if an organization doesn't have the resources to have a trained, knowledgeable person in-house to kind of deal with the HR issues, then I always think that it's worth the money. It's worth a couple $1,000s to consult with either an employment law attorney or an HR
on a retainer. I agree, fractionally.
Make sure that
Mhm.
Yeah, that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's, and taking that proactive approach so that you don't end up on the back end where you're, in six or
Yeah.
seven figure litigation, because you inadvertently, didn't comply with some nuanced
Yeah.
employment law.
And it's so unfair, right, to the person because I know the assumption is like, well, we're small, it's fine, you'll just deal with it. And like exactly that person, usually a female who is a receptionist or an admin person or an office manager, becomes that person that people go to with
Right.
conflicts, with drama, with problems, even outside of right compliance. And it's unfair to them to set them up like that
Right.
because I agree, they're not prepared, they cannot handle a lot of situations. So going and having a fractional either consultant or an attorney, and most of us work with each other, right? Every HR consultant would give a recommendation to an employment attorney that they work with, that they're connected with, just because our worlds intertwine so much. So last question before I let you go, because I'm sure you're busy. Any like hot issues in employment law right now? You said it's changing every day, something that is happening now. It's a hot issue, hot topic.
I think ever, of course, since the pandemic, remote issues, can continue to be a hot topic because the pandemic really fundamentally changed the way a lot of companies operate and where their employees are physically located. So I think at this point, most companies have sort of gotten over the logistical questions in terms of, well, if I have employees spread out throughout the country, which states' employment laws am I applying? Which states, tax rules am I complying with? I think that the big issue that a lot of companies are still struggling with are the performance management pieces of it. How do we manage the performance when you don't have everyone under the same roof, when everybody is spread out, when everybody's behind a computer screen? So I think developing really clear remote work policies and really getting a game plan in place as to how you're managing employee performance even when everybody's spread out, I think is something that a
Yeah,
lot of companies are still looking at. And then I think the other piece of it is the culture issue, right? Like, how are you maintaining your company culture when you
yeah.
have employees spread out across 6 or 7 or more different states, and everybody's behind their computer screens, not around the water cooler chit chatting? How do you maintain that company culture and be
Yeah.
the company that you set out to be?
Totally. I so agree with you. We're seeing both of those. And also, what I'm seeing is a lot of people have actually either younger and have never worked in the office. So, talk about that professionalism, right? They don't
Mhm.
even have that experience. They've never been like they came out of college and they went to work, and it's always been remote. And another piece of it is around culture and building that trust, that relationship, communications with someone you never met. And we
Mhm.
know how challenging it can be, right? It's like it's
Yes.
hard for us. It's like over Zoom to connect with someone, and it can be really awkward. So having teams that actually never met, we work with a lot of clients where half of their workforce was hired in the last couple of years and never met each other. They don't know each other. So then we run into situation, right, of like the old group of people who've been there for a while, and then all the newbies that have no idea what's happening. So yeah, I love that you're bringing that point. It's definitely we can figure out sometimes the compliance, but it's to me it's always, and again I'm not, that's why I'm not an attorney, but people element, like people element is hard.
It's so hard. And as I was telling you, before we went live, one of the things that I always tell my clients is that while, as an employment law attorney, I am a big believer in legal compliance and I see the value and importance of it. I very firmly believe that your organization's culture is as important, if not more important, than strict legal compliance. Because if you have a great culture, if you're a place that your employees want to work, they feel respected, they feel valued, they feel like they're part of the team, they're not running to a plaintiff's employment law attorney to sue you because they miss a lunch break one day.
Yeah,
On the
totally.
flip side, if your culture is not great, if people feel like they're not valued, they're just, a number on a spreadsheet or a cog on a wheel, they're looking for opportunities to
Get
potentially
justice one
they're,
way or the other.
they're looking for justice. So, if you do slip up on that meal or rest break, it's a lot more likely that they're going to go consult with an attorney and you are going to see a claim. So I very firmly, believe that culture is incredibly important, even in many cases, I think more so than 100% legal compliance.
I love that. What a perfect way to end this conversation with culture crafters. I agree with you. And that's why when I created my company over 10 years ago now, it's like it's about crafting. And culture is never stagnant, and culture is
Mhm.
always changing, and you're always co-creating with your people, with your employees, with consultants, with attorneys. Like we're always, I feel like, crafting culture that is relevant, that is inclusive, that is equitable, that is just and fair. So thank you so much. Thanks for your expertise. I think you're one of the very few attorneys that when I'm in meetings with you, I always listen to you. Like,
Aw,
you're, it's like you make it simple to understand. I think
thank
that's what I'm trying to say. It's you're engaging, you're interesting. And yeah, if you are in California, please reach out to Jenna Leyton-Jones. She's amazing. She gets it. She understands culture. She understands people. She's not gonna just educate you on compliance.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Anya. And I feel the same way. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and you have so much, so much knowledge to share. And I appreciate you having me.
Thank you so much. Well, if you guys have any questions, just leave them in the comments. I will tag Jenna and I'm sure she'll be able to respond if you have any questions. And yeah, leave her a comment. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.